Hello evangelical friends, welcome back to Evangelical Platform, a YouTube channel dedicated to preserving the gospel in a complex, messy, postmodern world. I'm Dr. Frederick Mulder, and if you enjoy this channel, won't you subscribe and send it to friends who can be equipped and encouraged by listening to the things we discuss on this channel. Today I want to share with you the sad news that the Dutch Reformed Church approved same-sex partnerships for vicars or pastors yesterday at their General Synod in South Africa. What I want to do is I want to give you just a brief overview of the most crucial decisions they took. I'm going to translate from the Afrikaans to English. I wasn't able to find an English translation online, so I'm going to try to just extract from that for you the essence. And then as I grew up in the Dutch Reformed Church and I studied at one of its seminaries and I was part of these conversations 15 years ago, I'm going to share just a couple of thoughts afterwards. And I do think there will be some interesting things, even if you're not in the Dutch Reformed Church, maybe you're Anglican or Presbyterian in the States. I'm going to mention one or two important figures like R.C. Sproul, that will be one of the key figures, and also G.I. Packer at the end of the conversation. So please stay tuned, and if you're interested, just to listen to more or less what they approved yesterday. So let me read for you the key section, and then after that I'll make some comments. So point 8, I think, was the crucial decision. The General Synod acknowledged that they are, 8.1, church boards and ministers who do not see their way open to confirm civil partnerships between people of the same gender. 8.2, that there are also church boards and ministers who see their way open to confirm civil partnerships between people of the same gender. Number 9, the General Synod would like to confirm the room given to everyone to act in accordance with their own convictions. Number 10, the General Synod tasks Atlas, in English, the General Task Team for Doctrine and Topical Issues, to develop a formulary for the confirmation of civil partnerships between people of the same gender. So that would be the most important part of this document, I think, that really crystallizes what they have done. So this will mean that you can be an ordained minister and you can be in a sexual relationship with another man or a woman if you're a woman. So just a couple of thoughts reflecting back. So I went to Pretoria University. I did my bachelor's degree there and my master's degree, and I remember even at that time how the progressives were getting a foot in the door and started to make new appointments. I'll never forget it. One day, one of my evangelical professors was quite frustrated, and we had coffee, and he told us of a new appointment at the faculty and that they selected a more progressive professor consciously. And one of the key professors who was also involved in that decision was the author of this book, Professor Konrad Wetmar. Now, the reason I mention Professor Wetmar is because he was a respected Reformed systematic theologian after Johann Heinz, but he got his PhD in the Netherlands with the famous Professor Berghouwer in the 1970s. And that makes it even more sad for me, because Berghouwer goes back to this very, very classic, well-known Dutch tradition of Protestant conservative theology. And you will also know, if you're in America, that R.C. Sproul, who passed away not long ago, went also to Amsterdam and studied under the same Berghouwer for his PhD. So that's the first thing that I think is crucial. New appointments were made in the 1990s at Pretoria, at the other seminaries, and the boards and some professors consciously decided to appoint more progressive professors, which over time became more and more and more until they reached a critical mass in the church. Another point that is also quite interesting, I think, is if you look at the progressive professors who started to doubt the virgin birth, the miracles, the resurrection of Jesus, when the church did not discipline them over those issues, I think it also created the breeding ground for allowing all these other things. And all the ones that made controversial claims in the Dutch Reformed Church, they were also supporting gay marriage or civil partnerships. Let me give you just a few examples. Ben de Toy in the Cape, a very controversial book, a very staunch LGBT supporter. He was also the head of the Doctrine Commission at some point. Professor Julian Miller in Pretoria, he became an extremely important and influential practical theologian who provided a hub for people to study homosexuality and also embrace that in the Dutch Reformed Church. Here's an interesting thing. Now, I'm not referring to this specific book, but there was a book published on sexual ethics. I will never forget this. And I was friends with a person who was involved with the book project. And he told me at Pretoria University how one of the chapters in the book on sexuality, they had to cut out a section of the book because it was not part of the agenda for the publication, and it was still allowing for the possibility that homosexual practice could be sinful. So you had an agenda developing at the faculties, and that actually, I think, planted the breeding ground for this to spread all over the country. For a long time, the evangelicals thought this day will never come. They thought they are more powerful, if you may, than the progressives. But over time, things escalated and became a snowball. Then it spread to Bloemfontein, where you also had one professor in particular, Professor Fani Snyman. He was the first one to support LGBT agendas. And then it became two. Professor Schoeman also became professor there. And then in Stellenbosch, the battle was lost many, many years before. One extra thing I thought that is quite interesting, I watched some of the debates in the Dutch Reformed Church yesterday. They had some of it live. One specific Stellenbosch professor that was very prominent in the discussions on the floor was Professor Louis Jonker. Now, he's an Old Testament scholar, and he contributed one little chapter in this book on the resurrection in 2004. And in this book, he was asked a couple of questions about the resurrection of Jesus. And here on page 25, he said that if Jesus did not rise physically from the dead, it will not be a problem for his faith. The incarnation still provides, some form of security for him. And then he says here also at the end, if it would mean that Jesus did not physically die from the dead, it doesn't take anything away from the fact that through God's incarnation, we can still believe in a living Lord. But he was a controversial theologian even 15 years ago. He was charged, but there was no disciplinary action taken against him. And my understanding is that the Dutch Reformed Church decided 15, 20 years ago that church discipline is basically something of the past. You had also at Pretoria one or two other things that confirm that with the Board of Trustees. We students submitted complaints in 2003-4 on homosexuality. The church board didn't even respond to them. So let me finish then with the two people I mentioned at the beginning, G.I. Packer and R.C. Sproul. So G.I. Packer, when the Episcopal Church in the United States allowed the consecration of homosexuals in civil partnerships, he quite famously walked out of the synod. And I just want to read you just one sentence that he said, and then I'll finish with R.C. Sproul. This is what G.I. Packer said when he walked out. He said, I walked out because this decision, taken in its context, falsifies the gospel of Christ, abandons the authority of Scripture, jeopardizes the salvation of fellow human beings and betrays the Church in its God-appointed role as the bastion and bulwark of divine truth. And then lastly, R.C. Sproul, just a couple of years before he passed away, they had an interview with him at Christianity Today. And he finished this interview basically saying on this issue of same-sex marriage that there is a time coming when many evangelicals will compromise. And then he said that we are actually entering a phase where we are returning to the persecution we had in the early church. And then he said, and I want to finish with this, that he, as R.C. Sproul, is willing to go to jail if that is what is required to be faithful to the biblical view on marriage. Tonight I want to ask you to pray for the Dutch Reformed Church. Pray for evangelical leaders who've been discriminated against over the past couple of years. I know one leader there that I want to ask you to pray for. His name is Dr. Chris van Wyk. He's got a remarkable story where he was part of the New Agenda in the Eastern Cape, and then he tells this story where he locked himself in his study one day and only took the Greek texts and wrestled with it, and when he came out, God convinced him that homosexual practice is sinful. And he went back to his synod and started to proclaim this message with love and with truth. And then in one interview he spoke about, homosexual practice. If we open the door for that, it could also lead to other forms of pedophilia and things. And recently he was charged at the Human Rights Commission and he was deselected from the synod. He's not allowed to talk to anybody. So I want to ask you to pray for him. I also want to ask you to pray for evangelical leaders in the north of South Africa. For instance, Moraletta Park Dutch Reformed Church. It's a church with more than 13,000 members. They are considering leaving the denomination as well. So please pray for the Dutch Reformed Church. There's even talk of some synods and local synods that might break away. Pray that God will make men faithful to stay focused on the gospel and not compromise. Thank you so much for watching today. What I will do is I will put some links in the bottom if you've got any thoughts on this. I'll keep you updated, and thank you so much for watching today. Have a great day. Goodbye.